Everybody, this is Peter Diamandis. I'm here with my partner, my coach, my dear friend, Dan Sullivan. Welcome to another episode of Exponential Wisdom. And Dan, on this episode, I want to talk about something that I see it coming very fast, and it's going to have huge implications, especially for entrepreneurs. And it's the idea that we can now use AI to replicate ourselves, not biologically, but to create an AI that sounds like us when it speaks, looks like us when it's a video image, and if it consumes all of the content we've been generating, can answer questions like us. So basically, your digital avatar, and not in this world, not just one digital avatar, but you could have an army of digital avatars, as much as you want to spend on your Amazon Web Services bill.
Yeah.
So what would we do with 100 or 1,000 Dan Sullivans out there?
Well, let me ask you a question. What would you do with another Peter? Not 100, but what would you do with another Peter? As you understand the concept and the...
Have him answer my emails for me.
Yeah.
So just to paint the landscape, I have zero question that we will be able to create. I'm going to refer to this as a digital avatar for the moment, a digital avatar of ourselves. And if we want to define the attributes, a digital avatar that sounds exactly like you, right? You can't tell the difference. That when it's speaking, your wife, your best friends don't know if it's you or your digital avatar. And then one that looks identical to you, that over a Zoom, the exact facial features, it looks real life. So those two, by the way, are here now. That capability to create a voice model of yourself, a company called Lyrebird, Lyre, named after the bird, has done that. A number of companies have followed suit.
You gave an example of that at the last A360, and I was sitting there and I said, it's really good.
Yeah.
And I could tell little things that were off about it. It was just audio that I could hear of Peter, but I thought it was really good.
Yeah. It's getting better every single year. And, within, 2, 3, 5 years max, it'll be indistinguishable. And then the visual is also here, where you can create a version of Dan Sullivan, and I could program that version of Dan Sullivan to say anything I wanted. Not that I would ever want to do that to you, but the third is the ability for you to have your avatar, the AI driving your avatar, consume all of your content. So you and I are lucky in this regard, meaning we've both written a number of books. You're on book number what now?
39 right now.
39. Amazing.
Yeah.
We have hundreds, if not thousands of hours of content of our teaching, right? In front of small audiences, large audiences, video and such. And all of that is data, and all of that data can be digested in to model a neural net, so that when I ask the question, hey, do you have a good example of who, not how? Or I say, explain it to me, or tell me about the gap. Or I say, hey, Dan, how are you feeling today? The answers are as, if I put you in one room and ask you the same question and your AI in the other room, the likelihood is that they would be pretty damn the same, because it's trained on everything else you've ever said and written and done. So this is where we're going. And there are interim steps between now and then. But, some people are going to find this massively exciting, and some are going to find it just really concerning.
Let me ask you a question, because I want to bring the conversation back to something you said about 6 months ago. And I'll say what you said, and then I'll ask the question about this. That you said the way we're thinking about medicine and the way we're thinking about education is just backwards. Okay, that it's not what the hospitals are going to be like. It's the fact that the hospitals are going to come to you. And the same thing with schooling, the same thing with education. The teacher will come to you. And my sense is, I was thinking of coach, that when people sign up for coach, they get a Dan avatar. The Dan avatar is available to them. My big question are the avatars, it's not a question about them being faithful to me, but would they be different? Like if you had 500 of them out there, there were 500 coach clients, and they were asking Dan different questions. Are those avatars independent of each other?
So probably not. They're probably all coming off the same server, and the data in is the conversation they're having with the coach client, and the response would be the same response under the exact same circumstances. But here's the interesting thing, right? The Dan avatar has the potential, if the client is willing, to know everything about the client. Now, you have different levels of relationships with your coach clients. We have a very close, I would say, sort of professionally intimate relationship, and you know everything about me, my background and such, but you don't necessarily know what I did yesterday, the day before, or the exact experiences, but you could, right? It could be that my AI pre-communicates to the Dan AI exactly the conversations I had, the challenges I had, and so that the answers being given are so personalized and so intimate and so relevant, if allowed, that it's massively valuable. Because right now, our means of communication is so slow bandwidth. It's like, if you go in to see a therapist for marriage counseling or whatever, it's like you spend most of the time talking at them to give them some data, and then a little bit of the time of them responding to you on that. So there's a lot of interesting transformation.
Well, it brings in a very interesting point. I'll go back. There were 500 Dan avatars, and maybe that is just not feasible. So I'll let that go. But the whole point is you could have some interesting bidding wars of who Dan gives the most attention to, like we're starting our bids at $1,000 for the next hour, and everything like that. But the thing that's always true, when something new happens, we adjust to it by using things we already know. So there's a lot of behavioral patterns that we bring into trying to get used to the new thing. It's like when television came in, they always opened a movie with a movie screen where the curtains, there was no theater. And that's just one example, but we tend to use previous capabilities to get ourselves used to new capabilities.
Yeah, it's the elevator with the elevator operator. And there's all kinds of things. And what we're talking about with these digital avatars is the 6 Ds. It's digitizing Dan, dematerializing you, demonetizing you, and democratizing you, where you're available to everybody, where the best
I was always disruptive, so that you too. So here's a question. If I were to kind of be a witness to you for an entire year, and we started last January, how much of what happened would have been unpredictable? In other words, as I'm watching it, this could not have been predicted in January.
Today on the digital avatar front?
We're at the end of November, because I'm unpredictable to myself, in other words, that I oftentimes don't know what's going to be the idea or the thought that gets captured during the day. So I'm always a bit surprised, because my sense is our brains are not logical. Our brains are associative. We see something and that reminds us of something else, and then we put two things together.
Well, my job at Abundance 360 is cover what happened in the last year since I saw you last. And now A360 has gone from a once-a-year event to a continuous event. We run, as you've coached me, we run 5-6 programs interim throughout the year as part of your membership, but then project what's going to happen over the next 2 to 3 years, right? So people don't fear the future, but they are able to anticipate and utilize. And so, the last couple of years, I've started to bring this digital avatar and giving examples. And I think what's happened in the last 11 months is nothing I didn't predict, but I'm just getting more and more evidence to increase my certainty and the ability to be compelling to individuals to say, listen, this stuff is happening, right? Where one of the areas this year at A360 I'm focusing on is called the Spatial Web. And the Spatial Web is sort of the next generation of the World Wide Web. And it is going to be the intersection of virtual reality, augmented reality, and AI. And avatars are going to be a part of that, where you'll be in a room and I might invite the virtual avatars of a few friends because they're busy, but I want to have their voice in the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
So this is happening. I think this year at A360, I'm going to sort of like unveil the next generation. There are 3 companies that I'm excited about in this world. Many more, but 3 that I'm particularly excited about. May I touch base on them?
Oh, yeah. I'm fascinated with this.
Yeah. So one is a company that a friend of mine, Bill Klein, runs called LifeKind. And they are building digital avatars right now. They're working on one of Tony Robbins and one on myself. I think they should do one of you too, Dan. And they're doing reasonably well on voice and video, but mostly focused on voice. And they're also focused on the ability to create an app version where you can text and get answers. Like if you have a challenge, like the avatar will respond with content, with video or audio or examples that are appropriate. And it's the early days.
Yeah.
There's another company called Hour One, and it's out of Israel, and it is nailed the visual. They've generated a version of me that I'm like, it's like, that's me. I couldn't tell. And all of a sudden, I'm speaking German and Spanish and languages I don't know. And it's like, that's pretty amazing. So that's the visual side. They're working on the voice there. And then there's another one, which I've told you about, Future Loop. If you go to futureloop.com to see it, I've created an avatar of me that browses millions of articles a day and chooses the articles that I'm most excited about from my mindset. And then it surfaces them to my community. So it's basically an avatar that searches the news and then upvotes for me the news that it thinks I'm most excited about and I would like to share with my community. Yeah. So these are some examples. It's early still.
I came up with a model about 20 years ago. It's called 𝐑𝐄𝐒𝐓. And it's that there's 4 kinds of input we get. The first one is data. The next one is information. The next one's knowledge. But the 4th one is wisdom. And they have different time. You know, data is instantly perishable. Information might last an hour, 2 hours. And, you know, the average price stock on the New York Stock Exchange right now is 17 seconds. Prices stay for about 17 seconds, and then it's another price. But the big one is wisdom, and wisdom is in a category. And my feeling is this would be great for wisdom. And you've already cracked the code on this with the mindset approach, that basically what the avatar could do, say, I'm thinking about this, what mindset do I have to approach it with? Well, first of all, I would find that of enormous value. Just how do you think about what you're thinking about? But it gives me a reverse possibility, Peter, and I just thought of it,
Please.
That there's 2 parts to the project. When you're creating new knowledge in that, you act as if you're creating it for your avatar. And my sense is that your approach to how you would communicate it would be totally different because you're thinking of a 2-stage thing. You're creating for the avatar and then the avatar interacting with other people.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, right? Because part of that is as well, when I'm teaching a lesson into video and I know that that video is going to be watched by someone to learn a subject, that's an interesting interim. The video is static. The avatar would be dynamic.
You know, I went to a college where for 4 years, all we did was read the great books of the Western world. It's St. John's. They have 2 campuses in Annapolis, Maryland, and Santa Fe, New Mexico. And I went there for 4 years because I wanted to read all these books and I don't have the discipline. I just wanted to know where thoughts that we're thinking today actually came from. And every thought, you know, every idea has a history.
I know.
Every thought has a history. But what I came up with from the 5 years was how to create a group discussion where people are constantly learning. I really mastered this because that was the format there. And I said, well, it could be a discussion about anything. But the reason why we remember great philosophers is mainly because of their mindsets, not because of the particular idea, which may no longer hold, but they had a particular mindset about how they thought about their thinking. And I think this is really fascinating to me, just for self-awareness of how you actually think about your thinking. Anyway.
How do you think the world will change? I mean, one of the questions becomes, how do you think of a digital avatar that comes to you for a meeting where it's not Dan? When I talk to Ray Kurzweil about it, it's like, hi, I'm, Ray 2 of 12. And do I accept that digital avatar in a conversation as readily as the individual?
Well, we've actually had a test model this year to figure out those who do and those don't, and it's Zoom. I just love Zoom. I mean, I can't get enough Zoom. I do 6-7 hours. And I said, I grew up basically lonely on a farm. Zoom's a pretty good experience. But I noticed, so for example, we have 100 people in the last 6 weeks who just said, okay, we'll do the workshops on Zoom. But they haven't been doing the workshops since June. They said, we're not coming back until it's in person. But we said, do you have a good idea when it's going to be possible? We don't have a good idea when it's going to be possible to travel across borders and everything like that. I said, so if you've got some inside knowledge, we'd like to have it. It will be helpful, but we think it might be 6 months, might be 8 months. I don't know the answer to that question, but we're creating a lot of great stuff and people are getting a lot out of the program. And they say, all right, I'll try it. But you can see when they come on, they're like television viewers. They're sitting there like this, and they haven't gotten to the point that this is actually, you've been transported. You're in another place. So my sense is that, it'll be like guys who are good with girls, I mean, some people will just take to it and say, well, I'm just going to get the value out of this avatar that I can get out. And then if there's 20% I'm not getting, then I'll go to the original.
I mean, it is fascinating, the ability, because in one sense, a book is that, but it's so limited, right? So all of the great coaches, philosophers, teachers write a book to get their idea across. I mean, some of my most transformative moments have been conversations with the author while reading the book.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that's within the last 500 years, really. It wasn't until mass printing that you got that. And there's a real belief that the whole notion of individuality and consciousness really came out of people's setting up this dialogue with a printed book. Shakespeare is actually the very first storyteller who had people talking to themselves. And they can't find it anywhere before Shakespeare where Macbeth stands and says, well, I'm thinking about it this way and I'm thinking about this way. And he said, the reason why it's so unusual is because it didn't happen before. And it came from people being alone with books and having dialogues with books. So it's my feeling is that it would change consciousness.
Yeah. So, it's like we accept that when I read a great book, it's not the author sitting there telling me about it. But I think, if someone had a conversation with my avatar and I say, listen, this avatar knows everything I know, and it's trained up on everything I've ever taught. It understands all of the mindsets, longevity, exponential, moonshot, abundance mindsets that I teach. There is a value there. And the good thing about it is it's completely demonetized and democratized.
Yeah.
I could touch 1 million lives that way instead of 360, at A360.
Well, I could see it right away, with our coaches, our associate coaches, and our salespeople and our program advisors, just to get together with the Dan avatar and ask, pepper him with all sorts of questions on how he would approach this and what should we get across here. I could see immediate uses for it in coach, Those who liked it got to stay, and those who didn't like it would.
Yep.
The adaption cycle is going to be the same as for anything else. There's going to be first in, but I bet I would adjust to it in a half hour. I'd be totally comfortable with it. Here's the thing is having a conversation with yourself.
That's fascinating. I think that's fascinating. Talk about being able to move yourself, call your own bullshit.
Well, not only that, but being an observer to how your mind actually works.
Yeah. Yeah, because you've built a body of knowledge. There's another part of this which is bringing back your deceased family members, right? So I think there's a business, if I had more time and more energy, I might start it, is you have someone in your family that you're worried about end of their life. You can go and fully digitize them visually, right? You can create a perfect digital avatar. You can load up all the images. You can go and record their voice properly. And then you could have effectively spend a day asking them all kinds of questions about how they feel about this, how they think about this, where'd you do this, and get enough data to populate so that, you lose your mom and your dad, you have a virtual version of them that you could have conversations with. That is a fascinating business to be had.
Well, and then you'd get inventive really fast. The other thing is, would you have an impact on the avatar? Like if I'm having a conversation with the avatar, am I having an impact? In other words, is a learning process actually going on? Because after all, this is part of the avatar's knowledge, is having conversations with other people. It might be the bridge to being okay with artificial intelligence, Peter. If it sounds like us and looks like us, it might remove a big barrier accepting artificial intelligence.
I've had at A360 the last couple of years, a few companies, one out of Australia in particular, that has overcome the Uncanny Valley.
Yeah.
Right. The Uncanny Valley is where you've got a computer generated video of a person that is like 95 or 98%, but it's just a little bit weird. You're going,
it's creepy close.
It's spooky. Yes. And they've overcome that now. And so the tech to be able to create identical replicants is there. The voice is coming. I think this year at A360, I should do an update session on this and bring some of these companies so you can see it.
Yeah.
We're going to be focusing a lot on augmented virtual reality and the spatial web, just because that is one of the technologies that's about to hit a massive knee in the curve. And I want to bring some of the top CEOs and companies and demonstrate. Everybody coming to A360 is getting an Oculus 2 headset shipped to them so that we can do part of the fourth day in VR. Do you remember where you were the first time you saw www someplace? For me, it was on the side of a bus. And then the first website I visited, and it was like, oh, what is this? This is interesting.
Yeah.
About to all change again.
Yeah, I mean, there's that capture of a morning show, a TV morning show.
Good Morning America.
Brian Gumbel, I think. He says, what's this .com stuff?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's very philosophical. This is a technological crossover that's intensely philosophical. And the reason is because you begin, well, which one's me and, what's actually happening here? Because, it's the Shakespeare phrase, all of life's a play and every one of us is an actor. So we have a way of putting together a public presentation. We know that it's important for us to not surprise them all the time, that there's something dependable and predictable about us. But the people we like the most are where we can kind of vary that a little bit and we can do it. But my feeling is we have journaling. Journaling is a known breakthrough for people in terms of getting to know themselves and everything. So this is like avatar journaling. You're actually talking to yourself, because that's what journaling is. You're essentially talking to yourself. And my sense is that this would be a three-dimensional kind of journaling or fourth-dimensional journaling. But my feeling is the biggest use of it would be people talking to themselves, not talking to other people.
Wow. I love that. It's also going to play havoc with the advertising world. When a famous star is, pick your favorite Tom Clancy. What's that?
Humphrey Bogart.
Humphrey Bogart comes up because the real estate of Humphrey Bogart approved this. And by the way, this is going to bring back all the dead stars. Is right. You have Marilyn Monroe and Humphrey Bogart starring in the next movie that was produced in 2027. But Humphrey Bogart says, hey, Dan, listen, I have this new product I want to tell you about. And because he owns some certain neurons in your brain, you're paying more attention than some random person.
Yeah. It's very interesting. Elvis Presley, near the end of his life, he asked if he was the king of rock and roll. And he says, no. He says, I'm not. He said, the number one king of rock and roll, he says, is Roy Orbison. He says, Roy Orbison, why Roy Orbison? And he says, because he can sing anything I can sing equally good or better, and I can't sing anything that he can sing. But I often wondered if you could, have an avatar like Roy Orbison, and he was on stage, but he could learn new songs and he could sing. My all-time concert that I've always wanted was Patsy Cline and Roy Orbison. I'm kind of a country guy and they just amazing. And I said, be neat to have those two on stage. I'd pay.
We'll see it. There's no question we will see it. Only restrictions on this are illegal.
Yeah.
But we'll see extraordinary conversations. And in the educational world, and I've talked about this on the stage a number of times, and I'm just waiting for, and I'm going to, this year, talking about the future of education, I'll bring part of this, is you're going to go into a virtual world. You'll put on your next generation VR headset. And if you're learning about ancient Greece, you'll see some guy sitting on a slab of marble over there with a white toga, and he'll say, come on over here, and it's Plato. And you'll have a conversation, and he'll say, let me show you where I live, and let's talk about this or that philosophy. So you'll be able to get education, which is experiential. And one of the challenges with Zoom is we tend to remember experiences as we learn. So I remember being with you and Babs, walking during a lunchtime, talking about some personal issues and going under the trees there. And we're talking about Pokemon Go as well, because some people walking around there. But I remember that. And I remember it because of my surroundings and the conversation. So we're going to be able to have conversations like this, but maybe we're in the virtual world and we're on the beach, or we're in the jungle, and everyone's slightly different. And it's going to create much more memorable experience.
Yeah. But it's really interesting. I mean, just try this idea out for yourself, that if your twins each had an avatar and they could talk to their avatar, but they could talk to their twins' avatar, it would be really, really interesting to see what happened.
Yeah. I mean, having avatars talk to each other as well. And it's like, it's like, there's a lot of
No, I said this is very, very philosophical.
But Dan, here's the point.
I mean, this one probably alters your sense of reality almost more than anyone else we've talked to, because a lot of the technology is outside of us, but somehow this technology is inside of us.
Yeah. The thing I want to just point out is all of this isn't happening in 30 years or 20 years. It's just a decade. This is all materializing this decade. I mean, I wrote about this at length in my book, The Future is Faster Than You Think. I didn't hit on the talking to your own avatar part. That was interesting. It's happening. It's happening fast. My goal is every year, Dan, I'll share with you the latest companies and what you can play with right now.
Well, I'm totally open to it. I think it's terrific. I just think you would learn an immense amount just going through the process of creating it.
Yeah. Yeah. So anyway, it's an amazing, amazing world. And despite, the pandemic and all of the highs and lows and instability, the world is getting better at an extraordinary rate. Yep. And I think it's a matter of choosing that mindset, choosing that abundance mindset is really important.
Yep.
And then working with the people you love working with. Yeah. All right, pal. Let me just mention, for anybody interested in Abundance 360, I coach 360 entrepreneurs and leaders every year. We spend 4 days together in January, virtually and in physical presence. And then we meet 5 or 6 times during the year virtually. And we cover all of these topics: exponential technologies, what's happened in the last year, what's happening in the next 2 or 3 years, how you can use it, an abundance mindset, deep dive into longevity. How do you add 10, 20, 30 healthy years on your life? If that's you and you'd like to apply to join, it's not for everybody. 1 out of 10 people come in. It's www.a360.com, abundance360.com. Dan?
Yes, and we have a complete growth plan for entrepreneurs to achieve their own self-managing companies and self-multiplying companies, with the entrepreneur just focused on what they do best and what they love, and then have a complete personal life that makes all your success worthwhile. That's at strategiccoach.com, and one of our membership advisors will chat with you about it.
Buddy, have a wonderful day. See you next time.
Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Dan.